Welcome to Cultivated Live for Friday, April 19th, one day before 420. I'm Jay Rosenthal, co-founder of Cultivated Media and host of this show, Cultivated Live. And since we launched, our goal at Cultivated has been to be cannabis industry first, providing you with the most important, insightful, useful, and in this case, timely information to the industry. And we do that through two key ways. One, through our newsletter, which is a Cultivated Daily. You can find it at cultivated.news. And we do it through this live stream called Cultivated Live, which is on YouTube and on LinkedIn. So if you're following us on YouTube, follow us on LinkedIn. If you're on YouTube right now, smash the subscribe button, and you could always subscribe to our newsletter again at cultivated.news. In a moment, we'll be joined by Nicolas Guarino from Naturae to talk New York cannabis, about his business, about their products, and a little bit about everybody's favorite subject in cannabis, taxation. So we'll get to that in a moment as well. But first, let's get to what is driving the cannabis industry news today. For our first story, it turns out Americans love weed. As more U.S. states legalize cannabis and stigma around use declines, we're getting a much clearer picture of how many Americans consume cannabis, along with how and why they use it. 25% of Americans use cannabis on at least a weekly basis, according to a new Harris poll. And about 15% use cannabis at least once a day. So, Cultivated readers and viewers, you are in very good company. And of course, this is despite the federal government still classifying cannabis as a Schedule I controlled substance, though with any luck, reform may be coming soon or soon-ish. Now here's what else the poll found. 27% of Americans live in a state with legal cannabis, we know that. 64% of Americans say cannabis is no longer carries a stigma it used to have, and 59% say they're surprised the federal government hasn't legalized it yet. And around 70% say cannabis will be as popular as alcohol and will only get more popular. So that is some interesting news from Harris poll. And as soon as that poll was released this 420 week, we have this from DC. Senator Jackie Rosen, a Nevada Democrat, introduced the Harnessing Opportunity by Pursuing Expungement, the HOPE Act, in the Senate on Thursday. The bill would create a federal grant program to help expunge cannabis-related convictions in states where it's legal. Last year, Representative David Joyce, a Republican, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a progressive Democrat from New York, introduced a version of the HOPE Act in the House. Now, the bill never made it to a floor vote, though supportive lawmakers have long hoped to attach it to other cannabis reform bills like safer banking, which would let cannabis companies access the banking system like any other industry. Those that follow this closely know. For her part, here's what Senator Rosen had to say. While cannabis has been regulated in our state since 2017, many Nevadans are still dealing with the effects of past low-level marijuana offenses. Having a record for something that is now legal in our state threatens Nevada's ability to get a job, apply for housing, and contribute to our state's economy. Now, for his part, Senator Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, had this to say. As we continue to find a path forward on Safer Banking Act and cannabis reform, I'm committed to including the HOPE Act to ensure expungement of records is part of the package. We must ensure those who are most harmed by the war on drugs don't get shut out of the growing industry. So, okay, back to you, Senate and House. Let's get them both done. Now, some quick hits around the industry. Some more bad news in Florida. A new poll from Main Street Research and Florida Atlantic University found that only 47% of voters are supportive of the measure to legalize cannabis in the state. Now remember, Floridians will vote in November, and the measure needs 60% to pass. Another point in the brewing hemp versus weed battle. Missouri's Attorney General is launching a consumer protection investigation into illicit vapes and cannabis products, including Delta-8 THC, which his office says has been packaged into candies that are attractive to children. To Kentucky, medical cannabis licenses will be available in Kentucky by July 1st, up from the original date of January 1st, 2025, after Governor Andy Beshear signed House Bill 829 into law. To Maine, authorities in rural Maine seized about 3,400 cannabis plants in an ongoing crackdown on illegal grows, many of which have been linked to China in the state. This according to News Center Maine. And finally, an interesting partnership to talk about. Cannabis beverage company Cann, known for its flashy advertising with celebrities, is partnering with Barstool Sports. The company says Cann's beverage infused with THC will be integrated with some of Barstool's most popular podcasts and video series, including Foreplay and Spittin' Chiclets. So that is some big news on the, I don't know if it's a celebrity brand front, but certainly partnerships that are interesting to announce around 420. And with that news that's driving the industry, give me one moment. I'm going to bring up Nick. Hello.
Hey
Nicolas
Jay, how
Guarino,
are you?
it's my pleasure to bring you up. You're the founder and CEO of Naturae, a licensed cannabis processor and manufacturer in New York. You're also the co-founder and board member of the Empire Cannabis Manufacturers Alliance. We'll talk about that too. Nick, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. By the
Uh,
way, I was just kind of sitting back here listening to the beginning of the segment, and I forgot that I was also in the segment. I was just like watching the news there. I was like, okay, and then
well,
that
you're
happened. That's fantastic.
well,
I didn't know that survey data, that poll information on the 15%, and you and
yeah,
I both know that that's probably like 25% that are smoking every day. There's just a delta there of people that aren't admitting it yet. That's quite something that 1 in 5, 1 in 4 people in the US are consuming it daily. That's really, I mean, that's a complete shift from the past 10, 15 years.
yeah. It's amazing, and it's both. I think you're right. Like more people are saying they do, but even more people are that aren't saying they do also do. I
Are.
guess
Yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah,
And I think you see that
yeah.
reflected in some of the political polling nationwide about the support for cannabis nationwide, and there are some, let's call them sticks in the mud, but people still stuck in the past, thinking
Yeah.
that the stigma is still there, especially I would say more conservative. And I don't mean that for Republican or Democrat, more conservative slash older elected officials are still stuck way in the past. And I think it just takes
Yeah,
time to stick there.
yeah. Yeah, and if this was unfortunately like some Puritan society where we had been sober for the past 200 years and there wasn't any alcohol or anything to compare it to, maybe it would be like a little bit more of a challenging thing. But it's like, hey, man, that you're drinking poison every day and you're hungover every day. Like, it's an obvious alternative. I mean, we've known it for 15 years, but or 20 years, however long you've been consuming, but it's an obvious alternative.
Oh,
Um, anyway,
I know I go to a lot of concerts. Like I know alcohol sales at concerts have to be way
yeah,
down because
yeah,
why
yeah,
would I want to drink 4 gigantic beers and feel like not be able to sleep and feel like shit versus consuming cannabis, feeling great, spending a fraction of the cost actually, and then
yeah.
being able to sleep better and wake up better. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. On that note, I got this Aura Ring very recently to just watch how badly I sleep because I'm
Yeah.
not doing anything about it. But a couple beers at night, man, and your sleep is completely done. Like
Oh
it's
yeah.
completely done. Smoke weed until midnight and fall asleep. I'm fine. That my Aura
Oh,
Ring says I got optimal sleep.
yeah.
So
Well, hey,
yeah,
from your Aura Ring is a sample set of one, but I think the sample set is much larger, and 15,
yeah,
20% of Americans sort of consuming cannabis every day. I'd be interested to see the Canadian landscape too, where it's been legal, fully legal for 5 years. My guess is the
yeah.
numbers actually a little bit higher or ticks higher, certainly as people respond to it. And I know you're not near the ocean, but if you lift your shoulders a little bit, it looks like the bar across the window is the sea, and then the
Yeah,
sky is the sky. But I think you're in New York
yeah,
City. Is that right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. No
Hysterical.
ocean. This is a bar right here.
It's like it's a good optical illusion. Give us a little bit about the company first, and then maybe we'll get into sort of more New York specific stuff. But give us a little bit of background, maybe about you, but also about the company.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief because I always go on forever with this one, so don't think I'm trying to skip anything. But so I myself I co-founded the company right out of college. My family has been in the agriculture industry, traditional agriculture like livestock forever. And I'm super passionate for cannabis since I was like 13 years old. So this was a dream, really. And we came in through CBD, like right out of. I actually left college like a year early because I got the CBD license, and I to my family, to everybody. I was like, that's it. I got it. I don't care about school. I'm done. I'm going to go grow some plants. So we did like really big scale agriculture in CBD. It was like 30, 40 acres outdoor. I managed the agriculture side. And then it was a couple of co-founders. One of them left, who was our CEO up to like 2020. And I was by the board named in his place. I was kind of like I guess we got Nick, but it worked out really well. It worked out really well. I really fit into the role, and we like for a year and a half there, we were like trying to keep competing in CBD. We were basically just like ingredient suppliers. We just did wholesale of oil-based CBD, non-psychoactive products, and we sold it to other manufacturers. And the price compression there was absolutely brutal. Like we went from selling kilos of oil at $6,000 to $60 by the end of the whole thing. So it was a 99% drop. Produce more, figure out how to sell more with less commissions, with less expenses. And anyway, that was like honestly that road, without it, we wouldn't even stand a chance at doing what we're doing now on the rec side. So then just skip forward past the CBD days. We got this opportunity in New York to grow, process, manufacture, and then distribute adult use products. And so Naturae is now a distributor of exclusively oil-based products because that's been our expertise for years.
Mhm.
Now we're adding hydrocarbon, which is our last sort of big missing extraction form, and we'll have solventless products, our live resin and resin products, and our distillate, like the entire oil-based line. And it's not that like we don't like flower. I smoke flower. I love flower, but it takes a lot of skill and a ton of capex and a lot of overhead to do that properly at scale. So we decided with Naturae, like we're gonna focus on oil. All of our team members love vapes. I mean, we've smoked flower, but we do love, like that's what everybody smokes in our company is vape. So it was just a natural fit to become a premier product company for oil products. And now our biggest focus is like with each one of our product lines, how do we close the gap in between flavors and effects that you have with flower consumption and any oil-based consumption? Because right now, I don't know if this is super appropriate, but right now, well, actually, I'm going to leave that out. But it just seems
Oh, we're about
it just
to,
seems
to really get into it.
well, it's right now, vapes are still a little bit of a watered down version of flower. Let's say it in a non-vulgar fashion, and we can talk about the other thing later. But they still need work to like really get the same mouthfeel, to really give the same full spectrum effect. And so that's something that's what like drives us in product development, and I think it's a really inspiring and fun thing to be working on in product development too for the team. Like it's because there's so much science involved in like uh, talking to the people that are on the bleeding edge of processing and that are doing like some very like static separation things at scale. Membrane filtration, which is like filtering at a particular level to avoid winterization steps. Like there's a ton of super interesting development on that side. And so anyway, a little bit about Naturae, and the thing right now is just that we're a distributor of oil-based products in New York, and we have our own New York brands. We have Jaunty and Resonators. Those are like our leading brands. We license Critical Concentrates, which is a really good friend of mine who's been helping us with this goal toward closing that gap, and
Mhm.
he's on the bleeding edge of this stuff. And the brands are doing pretty well in New York. We need the state to keep opening up as it is this year after a really tough 2023. And I think we might be able to build a business that can have staying power, which is all that we want in cannabis right now. We just want to be able to exist for the next 8 to 10 years because we don't know how things are going to shake out. So
Right.
yeah,
It's interesting because we often focus on certainly opening of stores, which is critical to the industry. But I'm thinking from your perspective, it is those are your customers, right? Like your customers are getting your
yeah,
brands and products into store, and when there's only 100, there's only 100, right? Like if there
yeah,
was 200, it would be 2x, and so on and so on. And so
yeah.
how do you view? I don't want to ask you about sort of how it's been to date because we've covered that a lot. But how do you think about now? The OCM is under sort of a top-down review, but also looking ahead to the rest of this year, but also into 2025. Like, are you more hopeful now than you were this time last year? I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Like in simple numbers, last year 25 stores opened. This year, there's already been 80 stores that have opened in the past 3 months or so, like over 20 a month on average. And I think like by the end of the year, there'll be like 250 plus stores, which already starts to become a fairly significant market. I really have no idea about 2025. I hardly really know about like the end of this year, but I think there's going to be like 200. It seems like they're really speeding up the opening process, and they're kind of getting rid of some barriers, like requiring the board to have to approve every single opening, etc. They're really trying to streamline it. As you said, they're under a ton of pressure. Um, and I think everything that they were attempting before, it was very hard to do, but they're also like they learned how to do it and what are the pitfalls. So it's gonna speed up this year. I think the biggest question with operators in these new markets is like, when is like serious price compression, like business ending price compression coming? And from my perspective right now, it's like impossible to know in New York. I have no idea. I really
Yeah.
don't. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think
And
it's
we've
going to be
seen it like
soon though.
yeah, like I'm in Canada, we've had it. California's had it. Oregon's been up and down. Like it is cyclical. And
Right.
and it happens. Like understanding that it happens
Yeah.
is important for you. It's important for them. It's important for all the operators because it's inevitable. It's just how do you plan your business around knowing that? And actually, now you having seen it even yourself in sort of the CBD market, like it
Yeah.
happens, right? Um,
Yeah.
and I guess that's a good question. Like having seen it, how do you prepare it from sort of a manufacturing, processing, and brand perspective?
The biggest thing, I guess, to prepare for us, it's a great question. I think strategically, from my perspective, is like ensuring that we control our inputs and that we have a pre-contracted price for the season. So we contract ahead of time. All of our contracts for this year are already set with price, and we say this is going to work for our margin for this season, and we kind of need to like stick to our guns there, and we just need to like hold price no matter how upset our salespeople get, and etc.
Right.
That's kind of, we just wrapped our head around like, this is a seasonal business. We cannot be in a position where we're going to the open market to just buy our inputs, because it could be that one day distillate is $35,000 like it was in Michigan, right, in New York. So as long as we have that locked down for our forecasted sales, and if those forecasted sales are enough to do the capex that the investments that we want to do that year, and to maintain some amount of debt repayment, then we just stick to that plan. Like it's seasonal unless you have indoor growing for extract, and for extract inputs, it doesn't make sense to have indoor growing. It's seasonal, and you just kind of got to plan a year at a time. And like you said, it's just cyclical, right? Like the dairy farmers deal with this too. The most agriculture deals with this. So
Do you
yeah,
think that gives you? I mean, it is an agricultural product at its source, but not everybody in the industry has an agricultural background, right? And I mean that
sure.
like some there are growers who are cannabis growers, but
Yeah.
that's not necessarily. I don't even
Big
know, like
ag, or like,
big
yeah,
ag. Yeah, yeah. Like, do you
yeah.
think that background sets you apart and even gets you in the seasonal mindset of like how you actually operate a business?
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, yeah, pretty much everything, like since I've grown up, and we're like five generations of farming. So like it's always, things have always been like on a longer timeline, basically. Like it's always been like, okay, we're gonna get this cattle into this field and it's gonna take 24 months. It's never been like, you know, a month or whatever. There's no thing that you do at a farm that's like a month.
Right.
So maybe, I mean, maybe that helps a little bit, at least to be okay with it and to say like, this is how it's gotta be. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a different mindset as an I would imagine as an ag person versus someone who's never been in the any kind of business like it before, coming and be like, "Oh my god, all these pressures," and you got to make the money
Getting
immediately.
overwhelmed,
Yeah.
super overwhelming.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, my partner is like, we have to plan for the middle of 2025. The inputs that we're getting now are for 2025. It's like, unfortunately, yes, like we need to
Yeah.
just be on a different timeline. Yeah.
It's a, it's a different timeline and the state isn't on your timeline, you're on your timeline, right?
That that's the other thing. Yeah, yeah. All the challenges you mentioned earlier with like federal, all the problems
Yeah.
that cannabis has make that like extremely
Yeah.
challenging. Because this is a double-edged sword. You can make a big bet on, I think that this is what we should contract on, and then the market, like if
Right.
the market goes down enough, you're in trouble there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of timing, you wrote an interesting op-ed for New York Cannabis Insider about timing of tax payments. Actually,
Yes.
everybody's favorite topic. But when I read it, I was like, oh, that makes sense because correct me if I'm wrong. You have to pay quarterly.
Yeah.
You're paying taxes on money you actually haven't received yet. Is that basically
Correct.
how it
Yeah.
works? Yeah.
Yeah, correct. This is kind of a boring topic, and I think how to make it
Not for
super
me.
simple and kind of interesting. But it's basically like we give 30-day terms, and then we need to pay before those 30-day terms are over. And so we've had very aggressive accountants that have talked to us, and they're like, "Why are you guys just report sales only when you receive the money in your bank account?" I'm like, "Well, I would love to do that. Trust me, that would be great. But here's the OCM regulation that says like, when a delivery is made, that is a sale. There's no way around it. Like when you deliver product, that's a sale. When we deliver product, 99% of the stores need 30-day terms. They need it to make it work. 70% of the stores don't pay until about 38 or 40 days. So what you have, this 90-day period and you've got 40 days, roughly half of that 90-day period, that you haven't collected any of that money, and you've got to figure, it's either coming from an investor that's going to loan you the money to pay the government's tax, or you've got a scale that you can use some of your profit to pay for the tax. But as it's structured now, there's no other industry that's this way. The state's compelling us to give terms and then asking us to pay them before we've gotten paid. And like in numbers, last quarter we had over the tax payment for March 20th. This is like, we're super open with our
Yeah.
information. Like we really don't care. There's nothing to do with it in our opinion. We paid like $700,000 in taxes on March 20th, and 250,000 of those were just uncollected, and we had to borrow 200,000 of them. And
Right.
that was, we were already on a previous payment plan with the state from last year, and they were like, we're not doing another payment plan with this. Either you come up with this or we're coming after your property. And they're the ones that set it up. So it's, yeah, it's I don't know what to
And,
say
and
about
this
it. I
is
mean,
this
it's
is and this is the what constitutes a sale, or the timing of sale is not a transfer of money, it's transfer of product, right? Like, so it's
yeah, we're financing the industry, right? As processors, most processors and some cultivators are financing the industry, and then the state's coming in like a loan shark that doesn't understand the context of the situation, and they're like, "We're gonna come after your property, man. We're gonna put liens on your stuff." It's quite tough. I mean, I don't want to sit here and complain though either, because like
but it's
we
a
knew the
small it
game
would
that
be a
we were
small tweak.
playing. Yeah, it needs a tweak. They just need to collect it annually, because the big difference there will be that 45-day period that I was talking about will cover an entire 12 months. So
Right.
you'll only be needing to cover about like 5 or 10% from your own cash flow. And the rest will have already been collected or will have been reported delinquent, and
Right.
you won't have to pay taxes on the delinquent payment. So yeah, yeah. They
Look,
they just put too rigid of a structure for like too early of an industry that wasn't properly built out. And this reduction of the potency tax, which is in now,
yeah.
is going to help, but it's not going to. 10% of your revenue is still a lot. 9%, whatever. It's still a lot of money. It's still a lot of
Yeah.
money.
Look, it makes sense to
Yeah.
me. I thought it was a really thoughtful write up, and kudos for you saying it, because nobody there's many people who are, I think, a phrase, probably not the right word, don't like to speak up on issues that relate to regulations, government. Like, why raise the flag if you don't need to? But in your case, I
Yeah.
think it's super helpful. Where we're thoughtful people make thoughtful arguments about policy that could be tweaked. So kudos to you and the team.
Yeah.
And I want to be precious with your time and the people that are watching today. But I also want to get
Yeah.
your commitment. You'll come back and give us updates about how it's going. And I was saying before we came on that I'm often in the Albany area where you are most of the time,
Yeah.
and love to stop by, do this type of thing in person.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, definitely. Well, time is going by very quickly. Give me talking about taxes and it'll disappear. Yeah.
I
Let's
tried to
do it.
make it interesting though.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think it is interesting. I think what you're doing is interesting. I think your perspective on the industry is a little bit broader, but also a little bit more thoughtful than a lot of the folks that. Well, if you just read the stories that are happening in New York, it's all like this state sucks. This like, and actually, this is the second perspective on New York that we've had this week. We talked to the folks at Platform Cannabis Advisors, who actually came from OCM to start their
Yeah.
business.
They're
They,
smart. They're
yeah,
super smart.
yeah,
Yeah.
they had a great, I think, a really unique perspective, or one that doesn't often get voiced, and that is like, has the rollout been slow? Yes, but the goal was X, Y, and Z, and those goals will be achieved over time. And every market needs tweaks, and I think that's the through line through that
I talked
conversation as well
to
too.
I talked to Matthew, I think it was
Yeah,
from over there, and he made me feel so much better about the full rollout when he like really went into the economics of it. And in terms of like putting the thing out, I just last night somebody asked me like, did you get any pushback? And I was confused about what he was asking. I thought he meant like that the industry people get annoyed that I was talking about. He's like, no, I'm talking about the regulators. And I was like, well, no, I mean, I wrote at the beginning of the thing, like, thank you guys. I did all the kiss assing that I needed to do at the beginning of the thing, right? So
well,
I
look,
feel like I covered myself.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting because I know from a Canadian perspective, and the industry has pushback all the time. And I remember one year in meeting, I was part of a meeting that was meeting with regulators, and someone said very bluntly, not an elected official, but like the chief of staff to an elected official in this case, he said after me, he said, uh, hearing
Yeah.
you sound like every other industry. Like, oh, there's tweaks to be made. Give us an industry with not tweaks. And I understand that perspective, but I also understand there's uniqueness to a new industry that may not be,
There's
when
more
beverage and
low-hanging
alcohol
fruit.
comes to regulators and says, we need these changes, they're speaking from a 100-year history, not 15 minutes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's almost like we've forgotten. I haven't been able to find like good information on what that was like when alcohol when it first came out. What were those arguments like? What were the no, you can't do this. They must have been so similar though.
I
I would
think they
imagine
were.
that.
I think they
Yeah,
were, but I think it was, this is my perspective. There's probably a lot more behind closed doors, smoke-filled rooms type of thing. There was a lot, like,
yeah, yeah. Right
transparency in
back
government
then,
was not
for
a
sure.
thing, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough.
and
Yeah,
and in
yeah.
fairness, like even New York, I'm from Massachusetts. There's still some pretty strict alcohol laws, right? Like
There are.
I'm from a dry town. We have 2 liquor stores.
Right.
That's it. Opening a new restaurant with booze like doesn't even exist. Like still, I think the liquor store is still closed on Sunday. Like, these laws
Yeah.
take, I went to school in Atlanta, like there's counties that don't have liquor stores open on
I was about
Sunday
to
or at
say
all, right?
I lived in Texas and there was full dry counties, like full dry counties.
Yeah. So
So
like,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, now people in those counties still drink, right?
Yeah.
And my guess is 10, 15, 20% of them smoke weed every day. But
Yeah, yeah,
the process is long. The lens needs to be a little bit wider. It just feels like
yeah,
every day it's a fight. But if you zoom out a little bit, take a little bit longer term view, which not everybody has the luxury to do, but it
right.
does change the perspective a little bit. Just like, wow, back to the beginning, the perspective behind you, that's not the ocean, that is a bar and a window. And right, like if you zoomed out a little bit, it would
It
look a
even
little
looks
bit
like
different.
there's a couple sailboats, right, sorry, right over there.
Right.
There's a couple
I think
sailboats.
I could
Yeah.
zoom you out. I don't even know how to do that, but maybe I could, let's see. Oh yeah, I got you zoomed out
There
a
we
little bit.
go.
All right. I
There we
really
go.
appreciate the time today. It was nice talking to you. We will connect with you down the road. So just hang on for 1 minute while I close the show, and then we'll sing you out. That has been Cultivated Live for 4/19. Tomorrow is 4/20. So if you are in a place where you have a local dispensary, go buy cannabis there. Please, please, please. It's a very big day for dispensary owners and operators. Be also patient because the lines are often long, but get to your local dispensary. Buy cannabis today, buy cannabis tomorrow. You can find us on cultivated.news. Follow us on LinkedIn. Smash the subscribe button on YouTube. We'll be back here Monday, 10 a.m. Eastern. Maybe we'll give a report about how things went on 4/20. Find us on LinkedIn. Find us on YouTube. Find us on cultivated.news. Nicolas, thank you so much. We'll connect with you soon.
Thank you, man. Hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.